we see instance after instance, and here is one of the pictures that does not have a Christian symbol or influence, but now you know that it was looked at as a providential interference here in the affairs of men that this came about. The general congratulates the army upon the glorious event of yesterday. Divine service is to be performed tomorrow in the several brigades and divisions. The commander-in-chief recommends that the troops not on duty should universally attend with that seriousness of deportment and gratitude of heart, which the recognition of such reiterated and astonishing interpositions of providence demand of us. So over and over, Washington saw God's hand in his life, and he was an amazingly humble man, and continued being a humble man throughout the rest of his life. Let's take a look at self-government now. What about self-government of Washington? A man asked, can we make him a king? Can the Constitution say that the executive will be a king? It will be a hereditary monarch. That was Alexander Hamilton from New York, wanted Washington to be a king. And he answered, "Sir, with a mixture of great surprise and astonishment, I have read with attention the sentiments you have submitted to my perusal. Be assured, sir, no occurrence in the course of the war has given me more painful sensations than your information of there being such ideas existing in the army as you have expressed. And I must view with abhorrence and reprehend with severity. I am much at a loss to conceive what part of my conduct could have given encouragement to such address, which to me seems big, with greatest mischiefs that can befall my country. If I am not deceived in the knowledge of myself, you could not have found a person to whom your schemes are more disagreeable." He refused to even think about being a king or take more power. And one of the things one historian wrote is that his noblest victory was the conquest of himself. Wouldn't that be great to have that said of you, said of me, that we were able to conquer ourselves? I mean, God's help. God ruling in our lives so that we could conquer those great desires and affections that we have that are no good, that are self-exalting or prideful. Wouldn't that be good? I think so. Well, how about his family life? There's Martha on the right. There's Nellie Custis, who is George Washington's granddaughter. And behind him is his Bushrod Washington, who's a grandson. Now, he referred to him as his son, so in his letters, he's talking about this little boy to the left on the picture. So what are his goals for education? He wanted his son to have a highly cultivated mind, wanted his son to think noble thoughts, to be influenced by great ideas and ideals. He wanted his son to have a proper sense of your duties to God and to man. Proper sense means that God comes first. God is the Lord. I am his servant. That's a proper sense of my relationship to the Lord. He wanted him to be serviceable to himself, and he wanted him to be beneficial to his country. Washington was known as the Cincinnatus of America. Cincinnatus was a Roman general who, when the Romans were being attacked by others there on the Italian peninsula, Cincinnatus came out of retirement. He was a farmer. He took up his toga, his sword. He led the Roman army to victory, and then he retired again to being a farmer. He didn't take power. He didn't become their king. He didn't use his position. He returned to his former position. And so Washington was much like that. He served as commander-in-chief. He longed to get back to Mount Vernon, as much as he could. He came back, and then in 1787, they wanted to be president of the Constitutional Convention. And he just disliked that idea. But he felt that he should go. And a couple men, John Knox, who was the famous artillery commander, urged him, said, General Washington, if you're there at that convention, people will take it seriously. Only you, General, can command that kind of respect. So he went. And then, sure enough, they passed the Constitution, and who gets elected first president? He did not want to be the first president, you know. So he serves from 1789 for 2 terms. He could have gone on. There was no end. There was no what? Limit. I'm sure glad that somebody knows those big words like that. There was no limit to the number of terms that you could have. That came with the 20th Amendment after Franklin Roosevelt ran 4 times and was elected. They came out with the 20th Amendment in 1947, I believe. But here we are back at Washington's day. He set a pattern that was never deviated from. All the presidents ran for a maximum of 2 terms until Roosevelt. Roosevelt broke that tradition. So here are his family and his covenantal duties of the family. He says, I should enjoy more real happiness. You know, I forgot to tell you what I was going to tell you. He served 2 terms, so he left the presidency in 1797 and went home to Mount Vernon. He was so glad to be home. Do you know how long he lived there? 2 years. He dies in 1799. So he led a life of service. He didn't do what he wanted to do. You know, he learned to be self-governed. I should enjoy more real happiness in 1 month with you at home than I have the most distant prospect of finding abroad. If my stay were to be 7 times 7 years. In other words, if he could be abroad in France or Germany or England for 7 times 7, 49 years, he says, I would still not find the joy that I would find in 1 year with you, Martha. It was very, very sweet. This is a letter in 1775. I shall rely, therefore, confidently that on Providence, which has hitherto preserved and been bountiful to me, not doubting, but that I shall return safe to you in the fall. So that's in 1775. Did he return safe to her in the fall? No. He was the elected commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, so he was staying there in Boston. He stayed with the Army. He only went home to Mount Vernon in the whole 8 years of being commander 1 time, and he spent, I think, 3 days on that one visit. 3 days in 8 years he was home. Now, Martha did come to the Army. She did visit him many times, actually, so that was a good thing. I go fully trusting in that providence which has been more bountiful to me than I deserve. Is that true? Is God better to you than you deserve?
Absolutely.
And in full confidence of a happy meeting with you sometime in the fall. So he was a man of Christian character. I have never found a single thing that would lessen my respect for him. A complete knowledge of his honesty, uprightness, and candor in all his private transactions has sometimes led me to think him more than a man, or to think him more than a man. Tobias Lear. Now, Tobias Lear was his personal secretary from during the war all the way through being a president. He set his appointments. He set his calendar. So this is the guy that knew Washington probably the best of any other living adult person, seeing him at work every day. And he says, I know of no one that exceeds this man. I mean, we had an amazing first president when you think about it. The power of Christian character. After Washington was chosen commanding general, his first orders on July 4th, 1775, forbade profane cursing, swearing, and drunkenness in the army. He said that if we don't ban these things, how can we expect the God of battles to assist us in this undertaking? That's what he said. Did I just skip something? No. Okay, so while dining, an officer uttered an oath, and this was in Washington's tent. There were several generals around the table, and this one guy uttered an oath. He cursed. Washington said, I thought, actually it was pretty dramatic, Washington dropped his fork and his knife. There was this pause, and he said, I thought that we all supposed ourselves gentlemen at this table. And it was just like a pin, you could hear a pin drop. And the guy that recorded this said, never again did that guy utter an oath around the general. A military coup was averted. Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, he said. They asked him to lead a coup, to overthrow the Continental Congress, because they weren't being paid. The generals and the men were not being paid. This was in the war. And Washington was on a porch, and he looked at their letter. He read the letter. The men were down, scattered around. There was a torchlight. And Washington kind of held this, and then he fumbled in his pocket and found his spectacles, put the spectacles on. Took him a little bit. And he said, gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray, but almost blind in the service of my country. It was said that when he said that statement, and they saw how much he had suffered and how much he had grown old, that tears came on many of the veterans' faces, and they just walked away. That was it. They were not going to do a coup against the Continental Congress. So Washington resigned as general, he assuring no military rule. He was going to lay down his sword. This took place in 1783. The man must be bad indeed who can look upon the events of the American Revolution without feeling the warmest gratitude toward the great author of the universe, whose divine interposition was so frequently manifested on our behalf. He says this just before he became president in November of 1789. He was a man of humility and prayer. And this is where we're going to end tonight. The prayer in the first Congress in September 1777, you can see Washington. He's been encircled there. That's the Reverend Duché in Philadelphia, where they were meeting. He's leading the prayer. He's in the middle, but Washington is there on his knees, and the whole Congress is praying. They're praying for unity. They're praying for God to bless them. He was not one of those who act or pray that they may be seen of men. He communed with his God in secret. Now, this is what his granddaughter said. And his grandson wondered where his grandfather went. Each night, about 9 o'clock, he would excuse himself and he would go to his study there at Mount Vernon. And so this little boy looked through the keyhole. You know, the real keyhole. You could actually see into the room. He looked in this keyhole and he saw his grandfather kneeling by his chair with an open Bible there praying. And so he wrote, in his opinion, that's what he did every night. Martha had her time reading the Bible and praying in the morning. She took about an hour each day. I was at Mount Vernon one time and I was sitting there and they had a woman who was playing Mrs. Washington, and I was the only guy in the room. There was a fire crackling. It was an actual poem. And so she says, and she plays the period. You know, she's playing as though it's 1776 or something. You know, that's the date. And so I said, well, ma'am, how do you usually spend your day? And I just asked her, because I knew that from journals that Mrs. Washington started the day, got up, that she had time in the Bible reading. And she says, well, I start my day about an hour after rising, and I read the Bible, and I take time to pray for about an hour. And she's rocking in this little chair while she's talking. I thought, man, they've got this part played. She is playing the role perfectly. I was impressed with Mount Vernon. I was very impressed with how they were doing that. Here's Washington taking the presidential oath on the Bible. And he laid his left hand, he has his right hand on the Bible in this picture. I think the picture is wrong. I think it's his left hand. It's supposed to be on the Bible. He's raising his right hand. I think the picture is reversed. But he laid it on his mother's Bible, Mary's Bible. It was open to Deuteronomy chapter 28, the blessings of obedience and the curses of disobedience. I'd like you guys to go home, if you can tonight, read Deuteronomy 28, because the first 15 verses are the blessings of obedience, and then the last 40 some odd are the curses on disobedience. He chose that chapter, and he put his hand on it, raised his hand, took the oath, and then he added. Does anybody know what he added to the end? So help me God was added. It's not in the oath. And every president since then has added that as well. So he took that oath. Now I'm going to skip kind of to the end of this to, not sure how many things I need to skip over here, but there were, this is in the U.S. Capitol, there's a prayer room, and this is the stained glass window in I think it's called the Congressional Prayer Room. I've only been in there one time, and it was with a bunch of Chinese pastors a long time ago with David Barton. Anybody know David Barton? Yeah. He's a historian. And we walked in there, and I go, wow, I've looked for this room over, and I've never found it before. It's right off the rotunda. It's very close to the rotunda. And there it says, preserve me, O God, for in thee do I put my trust. And he wrote out a prayer for all the governors when he became president, and sent a circular to all the governors before he became president, 1783, when he resigned command of the army. He says, I now make my prayer that God would have you and the state over which you preside in his holy protection, that he would most graciously be pleased to dispose us all to do justice, to love mercy, and to conduct ourselves with that charity, humility, and peaceful mind, which were the characteristic of the divine author of our blessed religion. Without a humble imitation of his example in these things, we can never hope to be a happy nation. I want you to hold on to that. Without imitating Christ in all these things, he's saying, we cannot hope to be a happy nation. And remember what it had, that lowest foundation stone? God and his word. See, without God and his word, we would not know how to imitate. We would not know how to follow Jesus. And so Washington understood, I think, there's a few other items here that I'm going to skip over to the end, and then we're going to take some questions. So if you have some questions, and you can tell sometimes I go a little longer here. If I gave you 3 ideas that you should go away with, I thought, let's summarize 3 things that really kind of, to me, stand out in this talk. First, the individual man or woman has unique value that is independent of their condition, their situation, etc. That's because God has created all men in his image. You're unique, and you have value not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. You're made in God's image. If you're handicapped, if you're smart as Albert Einstein, as if you're as dumb as Mr. Kinzer, you know, wherever you are, you know, you have value, you know, because you're in his image. Secondly, God inspires and uses individual persons, nations, and events to his glory. And he displays his wisdom and care for his creation. God is sovereign in history. That means he rules over history. He determines history. In fact, one historian, actually this is a theologian, J.I. Packer, said history is his story. And thirdly, principles that are taught a person and planted in the heart internally will determine the actions, the behavior, the thinking of that person's life. The things that are planted are going to result in an external fruit, the kind of character, the kind of person that person becomes. So I think an encouraging thing for us tonight is that we can think about influencing other people, planting seeds that will bring about a harvest. If that be your grandson, if that be your student, if that be some young guy that you're discipling, or other men that you meet with, or other ladies that you meet with, you can plant seeds that are going to make a determination and a difference in the lives of the people. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up now. If you have a question, and I'll try to repeat the question. Are there any questions? Anybody have a question about Washington or anything related? Yes?
Did he actually chop down the cherry tree?
Did Washington actually chop down the cherry tree? That's a great question. It's a good question. That's a story that was written up in a very popular book that was read about George Washington. There is no actual account of him chopping the tree down, but this guy, it looks like he kind of fabricated that, but as an illustration of his honesty. If you remember, he chopped the tree down in the story, and then his dad was angry. Augustine was the name of his dad. His dad died when George was 9. And I find it interesting that George had the character that he had when his dad died at 9. You know, here's a dad that did not have a lot of time with his son. But so it didn't actually happen, but it is an illustration of his honesty. Good question. Anybody else have a question? Yes, sir.
Was his son involved in the government later on?
His son? Not that I know of. That's a good question. I'm not sure about that, but I don't know of him being involved. No. So I could look that up for you, but might have to ask Miss Google on that one. So, yeah. Anybody else? Another question. Did George Washington have real
teeth?
Man, someone's reading my mind here. That's awesome. Did he have real teeth? And if you go to the Smithsonian, you'll see that the story is that he had ivory teeth, and they're on this gross-looking metal thing, like a tray that he put in his mouth. It's like hard to imagine, but apparently he used those ivory ones for parties, but had a pair of wooden teeth for common use. But he had very bad teeth. Washington had all of his, I think all of his teeth were missing by the time he died. The guy that was with him, Dr. Craik, on his deathbed, Washington took cold, and he declined, and they tried to bleed him. They tried to take blood, and they thought if you had a high temperature, taking blood would help reduce your temperature because the blood is hot, and you're getting this hot blood out of the body, and it's like, that really makes sense, doesn't it? So, no kidding, he declined faster, and he died in 1799. He was 67 years old, and Craik watched him. He was with him the entire time of the last couple weeks, and it was a very painful death. And his, the accounts are all how he faced that with great courage and relied upon Christ and actually prayed right there before he died. So anyway, very admirable president. I think he knew the Lord. I mean, as I've read, it seems like he knew God. He had a relationship with Jesus. He had a 26-page prayer book that was found in Philadelphia years after he had died, and it had his own prayers handwritten, and then a lot of them were copied out of the Episcopal or Anglican prayer book. They were copied, but it was in his own hand, and apparently he went through and he copied very meaningful passages and prayers, and he kept it with him because it was a worn copy. And so, interesting that he had that as well. Yes, Carla.
I'm sure you probably don't know the answer to this, but this is history.
Mm-hmm.
These are factual, historical
Right.
quotes and everything.
Right.
In the history. But I don't imagine this is being taught in public schools.
Right. No, it's not. It's not taught. You're right. But the thing I like about tonight is that I can use quotes, and you're just seeing what the man said about himself or about another person. So it is a historical account. And I encourage you, if you're teaching, that you use some quotes. Get some quotes that you use of our founding fathers or of great Christians. I was encouraged, Monica was telling me about reading about John Newton today and teaching about, tremendous Christian guy who had been a slave trader. He became a Christian, he repented from that, turned away, he lost his business, slave trading ship, and he became a great advocate for abolition of slavery and a pastor as well. But you can put that on your wall. You can put quotes. I mean, if you use historical, accounts, you're teaching history. You're teaching the truth. So I encourage you to think about that. Think about what you could do to make a difference. Yes, sir.
What was the inspiration for the Washington Monument?
The inspiration for the Washington Monument, I don't know.
Because it's in a free split.
Yeah, it was being built during the Civil War, so it was being put up years after Washington died. Apparently, it was about halfway, maybe a third complete during the Civil War. So Lincoln was president at that point. Yeah. Yes?
So John, you mentioned about Valley Forge, 12,000, you were right?
Was it 12,000?
Yeah, that's what the initial count was, but they suffered so much that only 3,000 last were able
Yeah.
to battle.
Yeah. Yeah, they went in with 12,000 and they came out strong, having a good training with about 8,000 some odd. So they reduced. I mean, it was a period of suffering. Think about that, to lose that number that would be a crippling blow to most armies, to lose whatever that percent is, 45%, something like that. Yes. No, not that much, about 35%. Yeah.
Wasn't one of his greatest victories was his ability to escape successfully from battles?
Yes, that's a great point. He said, wasn't one of his great abilities escaping successfully from battles where he lost, and he was never captured. He was never captured. Had he been captured, he would have been executed. Washington is a great example of a guy who never had any formal military training. He became a colonel in the Virginia militia, a drill, but no formal training. Then he became commander-in-chief on June 15, 1775, so roughly 250 years ago. That's when he became. And he said to John Adams at that time, he says, I fear you have appointed me into a position that I cannot discharge very well. And Adams just expressed encouragement, and he expressed confidence in Washington, but Washington lost almost every battle he fought in. He lost almost every single one. And the thing was,